Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to speak on a matter of public interest. And as I speak, as I understand it, hundreds of workers at the Mount Lyell copper mine in Queenstown on Tasmania's west coast are being told about their future. Youth unemployment is destroying a generation of young Australians. It's creating a jobless generation. It is condemning young people to a bleak future. Tasmania, my home state, has the highest youth unemployment rate in Australia. In parts of Tasmania, including the north and northwest, areas represented in the other place by Liberal members Mr Nicolec, Mr Whiteley and Mr Hutchinson, the youth unemployment rate is more than 20%. That is 1 in 5 young people who do not have a job. The statewide figure is almost as bad, at 17.4%. A number of young Tasmanians out of work is expected to grow. Some predict youth unemployment in Tasmania could reach 33% by 2016. As the Brotherhood of St Lawrence said in February of this year, youth unemployment has reached crisis point. The Executive Director of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Tony Nicholson, said it is a disaster. Mr Nicholson said, and I quote, "What it means for all these people is that they are at risk of never being able to get a foothold in the world of work. And in our modern economy, that means they're already being sentenced to a lifetime of poverty." A lifetime of poverty, Mr Acting Deputy President. The actions of those opposite show little understanding of the seriousness of the situation. This is an issue with wide-ranging social and economic implications, an issue with no simple solution. To even start to address the crisis that confronts us, we need to invest in a system that is flexible and can support people in the way that they need. A system that can address underlying market failures and structural issues. A system that creates opportunities and not endlessly punishes. Yet, all the government offer young Tasmanian job seekers is punishment, broken promises and cuts. This is a government that is too ready to blame young people rather than do the hard work necessary to confront the issue. Does this government really think so poorly of the 1 in 5 young Tasmanian people in the north and the northwest who are currently unemployed? We only need to look at the latest ANZ job ads survey, which showed that newspaper job advertisements declined in Tasmania by 3.4% in June. Nobel Prize-winning American economist Joseph Stiglitz, who is in Australia at the moment, told a forum in Hobart last week that young people are our greatest assets. In his many books and newspaper articles, Professor Stiglitz has talked about the loss of human capital because young people do not have jobs. When young people do not have jobs, it destroys the social fabric of a community. Indeed, in Tasmania and Australia, our young people are being underutilised. Their energy, their enthusiasm, their ideas are being lost and ignored. They are not being given the chance to change the world. We know that having a job can transform a person's life. We know too that being rejected for a job can be soul-destroying. One young Tasmanian told me of his despondency at submitting so many job applications and not getting a job. He has a university degree and is working in a cafe. The work is casual and he desperately wants a full-time job to begin a career. He wants to rid himself of his HECS debt, but he knows that is a long way off. He has even questioned whether he should have gone to university at all. Mr Acting Deputy President, we must work together to ensure that we do not leave behind a generation of Australians who have not had a job. But action taken by the Abbott government, such as their decision to axe the $130 million per year youth education programs, including Youth Connections, partnership brokers and national career development, will make matters worse for young Tasmanians who are doing all they can to try to get a job. People working on the Youth Connection program have told me that they've worked with many young Tasmanians in the north and the northwest since their program began. They tell me that they were registering 20 young people a week. A third of these young people have been disengaged from education or employment for longer than 3 months. There are many good stories to tell about the young Tasmanians who have taken part in this program. And I want to talk, Mr Acting Deputy President, of just two of their success stories. Chantel and John are a young couple from Burnie who are expecting their first child and have been part of the Youth Connections program. Chantel and John were not at school or training and not in employment, and they were not accessing any support services. Youth Connections supported Chantel with an enrolment at Don College for Year 11. She wrote of her experience with Youth Connection, and I quote, "Lindsay is awesome. I do not like school, and if it wasn't for Youth Connections, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm now doing homeschool. I do all my work and send it back. Everything is back on track." Chantel and her partner John are now living in private rental accommodation, are happy and settled. And John is working part-time and is starting a contract soon. It beggars belief, Mr Acting Deputy President, that the Abbott government has axed such a vital program as Youth Connection, which has turned around the lives of so many young people. In May of this year, the CEO of Mission Australia, Catherine Yeomans, spoke about the need for intervention programs that support young people to re-engage in education and training opportunities. Ms Yeomans said that the budget delivers a double whammy by not only making it harder for young people to access payments, but by also taking away funding for programs that would help them to re-engage in education, training or work. And I quote, "At a time when we should be investing in programs that help young people to connect with training and employment, the government instead is going to act successful and vital national initiatives such as Youth Connections with no replacement programs to ensure disadvantaged youth don't fall through the cracks. Government's desire to boost workforce participation will not be possible without the right supports in place to help people and make the transition." Mr Acting Deputy President, the results of Youth Connections speak volumes for its success. A Youth Connections National Network survey found that 2 years after completing Youth Connections, 81.5% of respondents were still in education or employment. Who will nurture and guide these young people when Youth Connections is axed? The Youth Network of Tasmania wrote to me after the budget to tell me how severely disadvantaged Australia's young people would be. They wanted Youth Connections reinstated and were also worried about the changes to New Start and how young people would survive. Why not? The Youth Network of Tasmania said, and I quote, "For many others, these changes will put many young people on the path to poverty and homelessness. Why not are strongly opposing the government's reforms that are essentially making one of the most vulnerable groups in society more disadvantaged than ever before." End quote. Young Tasmanians have spoken of their grave concern for what the future holds for them. One young woman, Ree, told me that she is concerned about the changes to New Start and what they would mean for her. She has a university degree and has recently completed TAFE qualifications in childcare. Ree told me, and I quote, "I've been applying for jobs and getting interviews but haven't been able to find full-time work. I have a part-time job, but this isn't enough to live off, and I'm scared about what will happen if I lose this job. I don't want to keep studying for the rest of my life, and if I lose my job, there is no way, Mr Acting Deputy President, that my parents could afford to support me for 6 months." This government wants to punish young people when they don't have a job and at the same time are cutting the supports that have been successful in supporting them into work. Not only does the budget cut nearly $1 billion in support payments under the Tools for Your Trade program, but it is also slashing a further $1 billion in investment in skills and training. The Abbott government has taken the axe to vital skills and training programs such as the Australian Apprentices Access Program, the Australian Apprenticeship Mentoring Program and the Apprentice to Business Owner Program. The government has tried to appease community backlash about these cuts by announcing a paltry $5 million for apprenticeship mentoring and has sought to establish the Trade Support Loan Scheme. One Tasmanian man contacted Labor officers to say that he's raising his grandson, who is lucky enough to have a bricklaying apprenticeship. His grandson is in his first year of his apprenticeship. He is worried that his grandson will not be able to purchase his tools without the support of the Tools for Trade program. He does not want to see his grandson take out a loan when his income is so low. Senator Erica Betts is the Minister for Employment, but we have not seen much of a response from him to this crisis in youth unemployment. In fact, Mr Abbott and Senator Betts are all about abandoning young job seekers. This government wants to cut payments for 6 months to young people who find themselves unemployed. How will they live? According to Senator Betts, they should go fruit picking. He said 90% of fruit pickers came from overseas, and he asked why young people couldn't do seasonal fruit picking. Senator Betts said, and I quote, "There is no right to demand from our fellow Australians that just because you don't want to do a bread delivery or a taxi run or a stint as a farmhand, that you should therefore be able to rely on your fellow Australians to subsidise you." Well, the response to the fruit picking was swift, Mr Acting Deputy President. The Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association explained that the fruit industry required a great deal of skill and commitment, and that gets to the crux of the argument. We need job creation in Australia. The Abbott government were big on promises before the last federal election, but they haven't delivered. The Tasmanian Jobs Program was a centrepiece in the promises those opposite offered Tasmania in the lead-up to the election. Senator Betts was even spruiking the program in this place yesterday. Under their Tasmanian Jobs Program, they promised to generate 2,000 jobs in 2 years. But at the current rate, that target will take around 15 years to reach. This program, part of the government's economic job growth for Tasmania, is a resounding failure. What makes this failure even more embarrassing for the government is the $90,000 bill they've racked up running a media campaign across my home state of Tasmania. So far, 60 people have been able to access this scheme. It is clear that this program is a failure and needs to be redesigned, but instead of acknowledging this and doing the hard work needed to address youth unemployment, Senator Betts, through a spokesman, said that the number of people that has accessed this program was a good result. This scheme provides a one-off payment of $3,250 to companies which hire people who have been unemployed for more than 6 months. Only last week, Jeff Fader of the not-for-profit group Training Australia was reported in the local media as saying that the scheme is too bureaucratic and small businesses did not have the time to deal with the level of bureaucracy involved in hiring staff. Mr Fader said, and I quote, "Our interest is about an investment in young people and the economy of the state." End quote. An investment in young people and the economy, an investment that is sadly lacking under this government, an investment that Labor made with its $100 million job and growth plan, a plan that had 31 projects across the state. Yet, in spite of the great promises made by Mr Abbott before the election and his agreement to match this funding, as I understand it, less than 10 of the 31 projects have been so far been funded. Though we've all come to realise, Mr Acting Deputy President, that what Mr Abbott was willing to say to get into government and what he's willing to do once he's in government doesn't always correlate. Tasmanian Liberal members should be fighting for the funding to be delivered to the projects in their respective electorates. They should be fighting for Tasmanian business and Tasmanian job seekers. And, Mr Acting Deputy President, we should all be fighting for our young people so they do not end up as a jobless generation. We owe it to all these young people. Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President.
Thank you, Sir.